happy Shavuot, and I say happy Shavuot, had Sameach Shavuot, to every one of us, who is watching us online. Okay, I often hear people say pejoratively that our festivals and laws are based on earlier primitive system and is therefore somehow inauthentic. They may be, but in the way that a modern automobile is based on earlier horseless carriages or jet planes on propeller engines. It is not a criticism or a defect. On the contrary, it is tribute to the creativities and adaptability of a faith such as ours, where individuals and innovation can coexist with traditions and conformity, even if there is a constant battle over how to exchange or expand or modify our practices. Once we used to celebrate Shavuot as the early summer festival or harvest festival that links the first barley crops, which was dedicated on Pesach, with the wheat harvest 49 days later. So I'm trying to give us a head up here, because many people think that that our festivals are kinds of primitive, or are kinds of inauthentic, or they are kinds of they use some pejoratively word, some downtrodden word against our tradition. But what I'm trying to let us know here is that there is nothing that comes out of nowhere. Everything has a beginning. There is always a starting for things. It's not just nothing comes out from the thin air. So even you might call it a primitive system, but the most important thing here is the adaptability and the creativities in our faith, or in the Hebrew understanding of what's supposed to be. Yes, there might be all kinds of pagan roots in Judaism, but the most important thing that after the giving of the Torah came to give us the understanding and to eliminate all this pagan understanding, and to give us the knowledge of the Holy One. Blessed be He, that there is no any other God except the God of our forefathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Harvest festival of different sorts go back thousands of years. We tend to think of them as opportunities that our more primitive forebears had for dancing around maypoles, having fun and misbehaving. When earlier humans began animal husbandry and cultivating the land, they would use them as an opportunity to celebrate harvest and fertility, praying in the spring for good, rejoicing in the autumn when the season was over and all the crops are gathered. The ancients worshipped the sun, the moon, different deity, and a host of spirits and phantoms that they believe control their world. If we laugh at them, we ought to stop and think for a moment about the level of superstition that survives and strives to this day. The extent of human credulity and gullibility has changed little over the century. So here I'm giving us this, which is very self-explaining, that our forebears, that is our forefathers, those who have been before us, even though before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, before the faith of our father actually came into being, those are our ancestors. These people, they use this festival as a festival, to rejoice and to dance and to make merriments and to do all kinds of, nonsense, by misbehaving, worshipping all kinds of ancient gods like the sun, like the moon, all kinds of deities and all kinds of spirits and phantoms, praising them that, these are the gods that control their society, that bless them, that keep them alive, that gave them all this fruit, or all this food, or this barley, or all this wheat that they are enjoying. But the fact of the matter here is that many people, or most of us today, might be saying, this is nonsense, this is rubbish. But I want us to understand that there's a lot and a lot of this superstition that still survive or strive in our present society, even though in the 21st century, in many countries, in many continents, there are still people who are still worshiping these idols and these, this phantom or these spirits or these gods or the gods of the sun or the moon or some other kinds of stars, But God, even though in the 21st century that it might be very difficult for somebody to even say things that somebody is still or people are still worshiping some stone or rock, which is to the Western civilization, it will look as if it is some kinds of stupidity. As we find out more and more about our earliest forebears, we see that long before the Torah, people metaphorically marked the recovery of the earth as it awakened from winter sleep in the spring, and later bid farewell to the blossom ground as cold darkness returned. All Jewish festival or all Israeli festival were based on earlier iteration, just as many of the civil and ritual law of the Torah are remnants of or based on earlier code, like that of Hammurabi, who was possibly a contemporary of Abraham. I'm trying to give us a head up here that most of our code, even though most of the code of the Torah is actually based on an earlier code, which is like the code of Hammurabi, or that of the code, the written code or laws of the Mizraim, of the Egyptian, which is known as Ma'at law or the Ma'at code. So the Ma'at code said most of the things that's written in the 10 words are also found in the Ma'at code or the Ma'at law of Mizraim of Egypt. But the only thing that is different there is that it is a kind of a summary, complete summary of all this code. And another one that is not found is about respect for your parent. That is not found in the Ma'at code, but in the Torah it is written there because it's very important that if you don't respect your parent that you see, how can you respect God who you don't see? So we can see how the Torah upgraded all this code and all these laws. But the Torah transformed this earlier attempt to formulate ethical and spiritual society, whereas Hammurabi treated the poor, the peasants, and women differently than the aristocracy. The Torah civil rule treated life within its system equally. That is, the Torah is based upon equality. Unlike the code of the Hammurabi or the Ma'at code, or that treated women and men and slaves differently. But in the case of the Torah, it isn't like that. Even the kings and rulers and the priests are all what are not above the laws of the Torah. They are under the law of the Torah, that everybody must obey the rules and the regulation. That no one is above the law. In the case of the Ma'at code, where Pharaoh will tell you, I am God. I am the morning star. I am this and that. So therefore I am above the law. I can do whatsoever I want to do, and nobody can challenge me because I am God. Unlike the Hammurabi code that treated the poor in a different way, or the women in a different way. But under the Torah, everyone, even the kings, even the judges, even the high priest, even though the Kohen Gadol is under the law. Whereas kings, rulers, and priests were always above the law, the Torah insisted they be subject to it. Even so, the influence of male-dominated patriarchal society is clearly there. It would take time for change to take hold. The Torah reflected earlier rules of holy spaces, holy states, holy dress and habits that set the priesthood apart as a class devoted exclusively to serving sanctuary on behalf of the nation, while the kings spent their time fighting, amassing wealth for the society, for the country, and for the state. So here I'm trying to give us the correlative association between the law of God and between the Torah and the king, the priest, because the priest, their job is to do what? Is to stay in the temple and to pray for the people. Their job is to do what? To continue to give their life in prayer, in fasting, in sacrificing, in seeking spiritual help and spiritual understanding and spiritual blessing for the people. As the Torah said that everything that a man has is given to him from above. There is nothing that we have that it is ours. It is not because you cannot come and say, okay, I got this by my power or I got this by my strength. No, it was given or it is given to you from above. If God does not want to give it to you, you will never have it, no matter how smart you are. Because we know right in this present day that many people will say, because I have a PhD or because I'm a doctor of science, so therefore that is why I am super rich. That is why I can get this job or get that job. Yes, it might be, but if God doesn't want to give you that job, you won't get it. If God wants to take your life in a second, He can take it. So you cannot be proud and say, because it is because of my knowledge that I have this. No, it is because God Himself desires you to have it. That is why you have it. So the work of the kings is to do what? To go to the battle to fight and to do what? To expand the territory and to bring wealth for the people, while the Levites and the Kohanim, their job is to do what? To pray for the people for spiritual guidance, for spiritual protection, and for spiritual blessing. The same thread can be seen in the ancient story of creation, flood, and intertribal fighting. It is all there in Mizraim, in Egypt, and in Mesopotamian culture that predate the Israelites. But instead of God's killing each other and fornicating or rescuing their favorite from the rebellious rival, the Torah transforms and understand the narrative in time of one natural universe with an order and system accessible to everyone. No spell, no magic, no randomness. So in this sense, the Torah unified the old things. The Torah gives us a definite and deeper understanding on how the universe works, on how the spiritual understanding works. Yet I am not saying, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that those of our forefathers, they don't understand spiritual things. No. They do understand perfectly well. But the direction in which they take it, the perspective from which they are seeing it from is not completely in line with that of the Almighty. Because the Almighty said, because the Torah said that the Almighty is a spirit, it's an energy, it's a force. It is not a stone. It is not a wood that a man carved with his hand and start bowing down to it. It is not a creature. He is the creator, not a creature, because the sun, the star, the moons, these are all creatures of the Almighty. The universe itself is a creature of the Almighty. So you cannot serve the creature and abandon the creator. That is when the Torah is unique, and that is what the Torah is telling us, that we cannot bow down to these things. They are creature. The Holy One has made us their head. The Holy One has crowned us as the head of all creation. So therefore you cannot bow down to things that are lesser than you. Our job is to bow down to the Almighty, the Creator Himself, who has created us in His image. In the image of God created He man. Still, praying to God for forces beyond our control remains a pervasive human practice and needs. Some see it as a necessary therapeutic process, while others see it as a weakness or as a weakness. Many think of it as appealing to God to change God's mind. So here we can see that, as I said, and I'm going to repeat again, many people see that praying to their gods or to the forces beyond their control helps them. And this is what the Torah is saying, and this is what I am repeating again, that it is a pervasive human practice. It's a pervert that do that, because you are greater than these forces. These forces are creatures of God. You are greater than them because the Torah said that we are the crown of creation. So why must you be bowing down or worshiping what you are above? So that means that you are making yourself of no value. That is why you are bowing down to something that is lower than you. So the point here is, no matter what happens, people might think, oh, you know what, I have to worship these forces for things to be better for me. But the Torah is telling us that the Lord our God is not it's not a bitter God. It's not a kind of God that points finger at you. Your gods might be pointing finger at you at all time. He might say, oh, you did not do this, or you did bad this, you did this bad. He must always be negative at all time against you. But the God that we serve, the God of Israel, the Father of our spirit, the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is not a God that points finger at you at all time. He's a God that has compassion and mercy. He's a God that is just. He's a God that wants to bring you into His fold. He's a God that wants to impart His wisdom, His knowledge, His spirit in you, so that you may know what is right from what is wrong. Judaism has changed over its 3,000 years of recognizable continuity, partly due to changes, circumstances, subjugation, and internal divisions. That is, the Judaism that we see today, or the Judaism that we are practicing now, as far from the original one. And that is the fact. Why? Because Israel has been subjugated by many nations, the Persian, the Babylonian, and the Romans. So we have borrowed a lot of this culture, and we have taken a lot of these traditions from this Persian, Babylonian, or the Roman, and inculcate them all into Judaism. So it is not of the pure original one that has been during the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, but this gives Judaism, gives it this nutrient, or this what do you call it? Which word can I use? Give it this speciality, because it has evolved from one thing to become something more dynamic, something more stronger, and something more, great, of the one that's of the present. Maimonides affirmed that many of the acceptable contemporary religions' way of worship were borrowed and adapted as a way of winning the Israelite off in its stages. Indeed, we see it in the Bible how hard they found it to abandon pagan worship. The Torah, in its wisdom, kept and modified these practices to help win people away in stages from what they were used to. Sacrifices were as automatic a feature of religion than as praying or meditation is today. Perhaps one day we will evolve extrasensory perception, or a genetically modified brain will be able to speak to God, in quotes. So what I'm trying to say is that Maimonides shows us an example, telling us that for God to win Israel away from paganism. Remember that Israelites lived in Egypt for over 400 years, and so therefore they are also taking a lot of these traditions from Mizraim, these pagan traditions and so on and so forth. They have taken part of it, and as the Torah said that they came out with a mixed multitude. There are Israelite and non-Israelite among them. So there's these pagan practices that is still existing among them, but the work of the Torah was to modernize it. It's a way of winning the people away from paganism. Just as a mother win a child from breastfeeding, from the soft food to the semi-soft, and to a harder food. So it's like someone who is a drug addict. You cannot tell somebody who is a drug addict to stop taking drugs in a second. If you do that, you are going to kill him, because his system his metabolic system is used to that particular drug. So what does the doctor do? They give them that drug little by little, and they reduce it, and they reduce all the doses until the body become adaptable to the lesser doses until they stop it, and the body can be able to survive on itself. The same process is going here, or the same process Maimonides tells us that God in His mercy, through the wisdom of the Torah, was winning Israel away from idolism, was winning Israel away from paganism, so that we can become pure and holy as a holy nation unto the Lord. Such transmission are part of the development of human and the society. Even so, we will always need system of ethics and pattern of therapeutic behavior. No country, culture, or religion bursts into the world from nowhere or start in a vacuum. They all emerge from the earlier form, added and adapted, and removed different parts. It is not disrespectful or in any way derogatory to suggest this. Quietly, the contrary, it illustrates progress and creativity. It is what I said earlier time, that the Torah shows us progress and creativity in our faith. That even though it has this pagan root from the beginning, but with the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, God Himself begin to teach us, begin to increase our wisdom, our knowledge, our understanding, trying to change our perspective, saying, listen, this is the way your forefather sees it. This is the way all those of forebears during the time of Homo sapiens, during the time of those people before the Torah, before Abraham, before our forefathers. This is the way they see things, but I'm giving you another understanding. This is the way things has to be done. This is the way things has to be done. We have to clean up our hearts. These are dirty things. You don't do this, don't touch this, try to go this way. God Himself was giving us a direction, leading us in the path of justice, in the path of righteousness. Shavuot as a festival, or Shavuot as a harvest festival, might well have come about because earlier people celebrated a pagan festival of fertility and boiled calves in mother's milk. But it has turned into the anniversary of the birth of the Torah, and the text that emerged from it, a constitution and the object of veneration and study, which reflect the Judaism of some 2,500 years ago and the way it has come to us today. Shavuot might have the root from pagan understanding or pagan practices by people celebrating, the ingathering of their crop, their festival for fertility, and praying to their gods, to bless them more and more, and so on and so forth. Yes, it might have had this root from this pagan practice, but the Lord is giving us the understanding to clean our heart up, like people not be merciful by people taking a calf, boiling it in the milk of the mother, and be eating it or sacrificing their daughters or their children to some gods, that say they are appeasing their God, because their God is always mad, and their God is always upset with them. And God is telling us, no, this shall not be done. This is wrong. You cannot take your daughters or your virgins or your male children and be sacrificing it to some stone. This is unacceptable. It is not right. So this is what the Torah has come to upgrade, to tell us that we are human beings, that we are above these things, that we are not lower than these things, that they should be the one worshiping us, not we worshiping them. Once upon a time, there was no such notion of an individual doing what he or she wanted to do. The religion or the state insisted in its hierarchies, obedience, and ceremonial law. Yes, once upon a time, in the days of our fathers, everybody followed a particular rules. There are hierarchies. you can't just bump out and say you want to do whatever you want. Unlike the world that we have now, where we have more freedom. You can do whatever you want to do. You say, even though we still have a law now, but somebody will come and tell you, Mama, I want to become a man. Telling his mama, I want to become a woman, or a woman telling her parents, they said, Mama, I'm no longer a girl, I'm a boy, so I have to do some surgery to turn myself into a boy. And they say, okay, the present day law say it is allowed. So we can see how man has even changed from worse, from good into worse. So it is a thing that is very, very complicated. So though we have the freedom now to decide whatever we want to do, but what will be your own decision, to follow God or not, to follow the Torah and to do exactly what the Torah said, or he said, oh, that doesn't matter, that is the old testament, it is old, it's no longer acceptable, I can do whatever I want to do now. So, but the Torah is not old. The Torah is a system that gives us the understanding of what is to come, not of what has passed already, but what is present and what is to come. Now, a new paradigm is emerging, that of individuality, as it is a burden and a blessing, that we are so much freer in the society, in the modern society. Every few people are prepared now to say that this is how things have always been and this is how they should remain. I don't know if this was what Moses had in mind on Mount Sinai, this interaction and conflict. On the one hand was the declaration that we obey first and then we ask questions. On the other hand, he said before he died that each one of us stood at Sinai as an individual who had to make individual decisions and acts of commitment. Moses also came from two words, and that must have influenced him. I believe this struggle between individuality and conformity is a good thing, but it is challenging and twice as difficult as opting only for one. So I'm trying to give us this understanding here that yes, even though Moses himself, was juggling between two worlds, he came from two different worlds. We can understand that he spent 40 years in Mizraim in the palace. He was a different person at that time, and then he spent another 40 years in Midian. And at that time he became a different person. So there is these two personality that is inside him, that is jogging for both of them, and he has to make both of them a balance. And that is where the Torah came in, because you can understand that even though you have this understanding here and this understanding here, the best of the two came together to form the Torah. So he has this understanding he has the Egyptian understanding of things, and he has the Midian understanding of things. He knows that okay, the best of the best has to come. So the best from both worlds came together. Yet it is difficult. It is difficult and hard. I understand that, but we has to make a decision. We have to make it right. What is going to be your decision? What are you going to do to make things right? What are you going to do to make things just? How are you going to make sure that that the women are not being oppressed, or the fatherless are not being oppressed, or the widows are not being oppressed, that they are also protected as God has spoken? Because it is not because this is my own, I do all my own, individuality. For me, my family, my children, and that is it. Other people I don't recognize, other people I don't want to see, other people I don't want to know. But Torah is saying, as much as we are individual, the same thing, we are also collective, because human is a social animal too. We have to understand that it's a social being. You cannot just stay alone and say I am alone. No, you cannot be alone. We are a social being. We interact with one another. We have to interact with among ourselves. But that is what Shavuot celebrates, an acceptance of our constitution, of the Torah, regardless of what we think. But at the same time, we are invited to metaphorically stand at Sinai and declare a personal commitment to decide how each one of us will worship our God and how much we want to keep and to what depth of our life, of our way of life will be animated by Judaism as opposed to secularism. So this is what Shavuot as a festival celebrate. This celebration of your individuality and of our oneness. The celebration of the giving of the Torah, the celebration of our constitution, the constitution of our people, the constitution of Israel, of the Israelite is the Torah. I'm not talking about the nation of Israel now. I'm talking about the real one, the spiritual one. So our constitution is the Torah, and we base our life and activities and our doing and our actions on the Torah. So therefore, we have to make a personal commitment. Or how are we going to live our life? Are we going to stand upon Mount Sinai again, metaphorically saying we accept and we will do? Or are we going to say, oh, that is Old Testament, it doesn't matter. You decide. The decision is yours. But as for me and my home, as for me and my family, we will stand upon the Torah and we will decide to follow the Torah. We who are bound by tradition and are free to choose want the best of the both worlds. Yes, we want the best of the both worlds. You have to balance it. Things has to be balanced. The things of God, all the creation of God is balanced. Whatever God has made is balanced. You see, he said everything I made, everything I created is good. There is nothing bad in the creation of God. They are all good. So therefore, my people, you decide. My people, we decide. I ask you and pray that you will choose what is right. He said, I present before you life and death. Choose one. But as for your father, as I am your father, I advise you to choose life. And the Torah is life. So the Torah is the tree of life to those who take hold of it. When we take hold of it and we embrace it and we just don't say it with our mouth but with our action, we do it exactly what as God has commanded, then we will be blessed. We will receive 10, 100, 60, a lot of blessing because we have done what the Lord our God has commanded us. So the practicality is not only by word but by practicality. Torah is a work and it's a faith. So you have to combine both of them together. You cannot separate faith from work. Neither can you separate work from faith. So they are both like DNA. They are both intertwined. So your work and your faith has to go together, and that is the work of the Torah. Happy Shavuot. Shavuot Sameha. Shavuot. May God bless you and keep you. Bye.